Have you ever wondered why some traders, given the exact same rules, the same market conditions, and the same clear signals, walk away with fortunes while others collapse under the weight of their own emotions? The markets are not a neutral field of numbers. They are a mirror of the psyche. Behind every tick, every rise and fall of price, stands the eternal duel between fear and greed, between hesitation and boldness, between the discipline of the higher self and the sabotage of the shadow. Richard Dennis once proved this with his legendary turtle traders. He taught a group of ordinary people a mechanical system, simple in its logic, direct in its application. Yet, even when stripped of ambiguity, not all succeeded. Why? Because the true enemy was not the market. The true enemy was the unmastered mind. Imagine standing before a screen that reflects your unconscious as clearly as a dream. A candle forms, and with it comes a whisper from within. What if this is the top? What if I lose everything? Another whisper counters. This could be the beginning of a fortune, a move so grand it will justify all the waiting. These whispers are not trivial. They are the archetypal forces within the psyche, warring for control of your decision. The market is not cruel, it is indifferent. Yet the mind attaches meaning, ego, identity. A loss is not seen as a statistical inevitability, but as humiliation. A win is not simply probability fulfilled, but a confirmation of worth. Here lies the battlefield where most traders bleed, not from their accounts, but from their inability to face their own unconscious. The turtles were given rules. Enter when the breakout comes. Exit when the stop is reached. Hold until the trend is done. Nothing mystical, nothing beyond comprehension. Yet, the simplicity revealed the deeper truth. Rules are easy to know but difficult to embody. Discipline requires the crushing of the ego that seeks to be right, the silencing of the fear that shrieks at every drawdown. To follow a rule is to confront the primal chaos of the self, to accept powerlessness before uncertainty. The market becomes the teacher, stripping away illusion after illusion, showing each trader the shadow they refuse to face. Have you felt this shadow? The quickening pulse when a position turns against you, the heat rising in your chest, the frantic urge to move the stop, to deny the pain of being wrong. You tell yourself you will exit with discipline, but the hand delays. You bargain with chaos, promising yourself you will wait for a bounce, and then the bounce never comes. Loss grows, not just in the account, but in the This is the cycle that swallows so many who enter the arena unprepared. The loss is not monetary alone. It is the collapse of identity. Richard Dennis believed anyone could learn, yet he also knew that not everyone could face themselves. To trade is to encounter archetypes, the gambler, the warrior, the king, the fool. When greed takes the throne, the trader chases without reason, imagining infinite gain, intoxicated by the fantasy of power. When fear commands the soul, the trader retreats, selling too early, clinging to security, preferring a small certainty over the possibility of greatness. The balanced trader, however, is the alchemist. He transmutes fear into caution, greed into patience, doubt into strategy. He sees the same chart as everyone else, but he does not project his wounds upon it. He obeys the system as a warrior obeys his discipline, not because he trusts the outcome, but because he trusts the process. Perhaps you feel that pull within yourself, the voice that insists you can outsmart the rule, that you can bend probability with intuition, that you can skip the discipline because this trade feels different. That voice is not wisdom. It is the trickster archetype, the shadow masquerading as insight. The truth is harsher. If you cannot master yourself, you cannot master the market. If you cannot face the storm inside your chest, you will drown in the storm outside. The turtles who succeeded were not the most intelligent, they were the most surrendered. They surrendered their ego to the rules. They surrendered their fantasies of certainty to the reality of probability. They surrendered the need to be right to the greater goal of surviving long enough to thrive. This surrender was not weakness. It was strength of the deepest kind, the strength to stand before chaos and not flinch. It was not about winning every battle. It was about staying alive for the war. And so, when you trade, remember this. Every click of the mouse is a confrontation with the self. Every position is a mirror. Every loss is a whisper of the shadow asking to be integrated. Every win a temptation to inflate the ego beyond reason. The market does not care. It only reflects. Your task is not to conquer the chart, but to conquer the unconscious patterns that sabotage your discipline. The rules are simple. The application is eternal warfare within the soul. In the silence before a trade, the unconscious stirs like a storm beneath calm waters. The chart does not tremble, but within the trader, an army of emotions awakens. Greed marches first, promising the taste of triumph, whispering visions of wealth and recognition. Fear follows, cloaked in shadows, reminding of every wound, every past mistake. Between these two forces, hesitation builds its fortress, convincing you that safety lies in waiting forever. The turtle rules cut through this chaos with surgical precision, yet the human mind resists. For to obey is to sacrifice ego, and the ego despises its own death. The market exposes this truth with merciless clarity. You are given a breakout. The rule says, enter. But the mind demands confirmation. Just a little more proof, just one more candle. The price runs without you. A sense of loss grows, not from money, but from missing what could have been. Here, the unconscious reveals its tricks. It is not content with what is. It is addicted to what might have been. This craving for alternative realities is the birthplace of regret, and regret is the silent assassin of discipline. Those who succeeded as turtles became students, not of the market alone, but of themselves. They observed the subtle tremors of their psyche as carefully as they observed the price action. They learned that fear of loss is not simply about protecting capital, it is about protecting identity. To lose in the market often feels like being stripped bare before an indifferent universe. It feels like failure of self, not of system. The mind then seeks redemption, pressing for revenge trades, rushing to reclaim dignity. But the market is a merciless mirror. The more you fight to redeem the ego, the more the mirror shows your desperation. Have you noticed how quickly the illusion forms? A wind comes, and you feel invincible, as though the rules are no longer necessary. The archetype of the king awakens, but it is a false king, swollen with arrogance, drunk with temporary success. The temptation to abandon discipline is strongest, not in loss, but in victory. This is the paradox most traders never see until it consumes them. They think the danger is defeat, but in truth, the danger is intoxication. Greed masquerades as confidence, overconfidence as mastery, and in that blindness, ruin waits patiently. The Stoics spoke of control, not of outcomes, but of the self. Epictetus said that it is not things that disturb men, but the opinions they form about them. In trading, the price is neutral, but the projection is catastrophic. You see a candle moving against you and imagine disaster. You see profit growing and imagine future glory. You live not in what is, but in the fantasies of what might be. Discipline is the return to what is real. The turtles were forced into this reality. Obey the rule, no matter how the inner storm rages. Enter when it says enter, exit when it says exit. Let the ego scream. Let fear claw at the edges of your mind. Let greed seduce you with promises. Obey the process. Perhaps you think you can outlast the rules with intuition, with cleverness, with the thrill of feeling in control. But is it truly control? Or is it the shadow convincing you to step off the path, to chase the illusion that you can bend chaos to your will? The truth, harsh and liberating, is that you control nothing but yourself. The market will rise or fall without your consent. The only dominion you possess is over the discipline of your own action. To grasp this truth is to step into mastery. To reject it is to remain chained to the endless cycle of fear and greed. The battle is not glamorous. It is not a constant state of triumph. It is monotony, repetition, quiet obedience. It is watching yourself tempted 1,000 times and choosing the harder path each time. It is the archetype of the warrior stoic, unflinching, bound to duty. This warrior does not chase glory. He accepts risk without illusion, and he endures losses without collapse. He knows that victory belongs not to the one who feels strongest in the moment, but to the one who can walk the long road without surrendering to impulse. The turtles learned this through fire. Some abandoned discipline, and the market devoured them. Others surrendered their ego to the process, and they survived. Survival was the first victory. Prosperity followed. The lesson remains the same for every trader. The market is a mirror, and you are the reflection. What you fear, you will meet. What you cling to, you will lose. What you cannot control, you must release. In this way, trading is not about money, it is about individuation, the integration of the shadow, the acceptance of uncertainty, the discovery of who you truly are. Every chart, every candle, every surge and collapse of price is a ritual drama playing out upon the stage of the unconscious. The trader who gazes at the screen is not simply watching numbers. He is watching the symbolic unfolding of his inner world. Richard Dennis understood this in ways he may not have fully articulated. By stripping away the complexity of analysis and reducing trading to rules, he revealed the hidden struggle, not the battle with information, but the battle with emotion. The system was mechanical, but the psyche was not. To follow the system required more than intelligence. It demanded inner transformation. Consider what happens when you hold a position through pain. The stop is there, a line of defense clearly marked. Yet as the price approaches it, something inside resists. The mind begins to negotiate. Perhaps the rule does not apply here. Perhaps this is the exception. This inner dialogue is not about the market at all. It is about the refusal of the ego to experience defeat. To be wrong feels intolerable, and so the mind invents clever arguments to avoid the sting of humility. In this moment, you are not battling price action, you are battling yourself. The Jungian perspective reveals the shadow here. The shadow is that part of the psyche you reject, deny, or suppress. For the trader, the shadow often takes the form of weakness, fear, vulnerability. To admit loss is to admit imperfection. But the more the shadow is denied, the more power it gains. A trader who cannot accept small losses is destined to face catastrophic ones. This is not fate, it is psychological law. Repression breeds eruption. What is denied in discipline returns tenfold in chaos. Have you noticed how temptation grows with silence? You stare at the screen, waiting, and the boredom gnaws at you. Boredom is not emptiness, is the shadow disguised, demanding stimulation. You crave the thrill of entry, the rush of action, the feeling of being alive in the arena. Yet the system commands patience. It asks you to endure the void until the signal arrives. Here lies another trial of the psyche. Can you bear stillness, or will you chase movements simply to escape yourself? Many fall here. They enter trades not because the rules spoke, but because the silence became unbearable. In truth, they are not trading the market. They are trading their own restlessness. The Stoics warned of this trap. Seneca spoke of men who are never at rest, who mistake busyness for meaning. Trading without signal is this very delusion. You act not from strength but from fear of stillness. You fear meeting yourself in the quiet, so you flee into activity. But every unnecessary trade becomes a mirror reflecting your lack of discipline. Each impulsive action costs not only capital, but also respect. The market punishes recklessness, but even more severely, it exposes your weakness to yourself. And yet, there is another side. Imagine the moment when the rule aligns with the breakout. You obey, not with hesitation, but with clarity. The entry is not an act of ego, but of alignment. The hand moves with calm, the stop is placed, the position is set. In that moment, the trader is no longer divided. There is no war of voices within. There is only the act. This is what Jung might call individuation, the uniting of opposing forces into a higher order. Fear and greed still exist, but they no longer command. They have been integrated, acknowledged, and placed under discipline. The trader acts not from impulse, but from wholeness. Perhaps you have tasted this state, even briefly. The rare trade where you felt detached, where the outcome mattered less than the execution, where you sensed a strange calm despite uncertainty. That is the glimpse of mastery. It is not absence of emotion, but harmony of it. It is the realization that the rules are not chains but liberation, freeing you from the tyranny of your own unconscious storms. The turtles who thrived were those who reached this state again and again, not perfectly, but consistently. They were not superhuman. They felt fear, they felt greed, they felt the shadow tug at them, but they had the courage to surrender to the rules. They allowed themselves to be guided by discipline rather than seduced by impulse. They realized that freedom in the market does not come from doing whatever one feels. It comes from binding oneself to process, to structure, to law. This paradox is ancient. True liberty is found in discipline. The battlefield of trading is timeless. You face not just numbers but archetypes. The gambler seeks endless excitement. The coward flees at the first sign of pain. The tyrant demands perfection. The fool believes he can outwit probability. But the warrior trader knows these archetypes, sees them clearly, and refuses to be ruled by them. He honors the presence of fear, but does not obey it. He acknowledges the seduction of greed, but does not kneel to it. He walks the narrow path, one trade at a time, building a fortress of discipline while the storm rages around him. There comes a moment when every trader feels the weight of time pressing upon the heart. Hours stretch into days, days into weeks, and the market moves with its own rhythm, indifferent to your hunger, blind to your urgency. It is in this tension that the unconscious reveals another of its hidden snares: impatience. Impatience is not simply a lack of waiting. It is a deep refusal to accept that the universe operates on its own terms. The impatient trader demands that the market align with his desires. He demands that profit arrive on his schedule. This is the cry of the ego child, not the discipline of the warrior. Richard Dennis's turtles were forced into patience, whether they wished it or not. The rules required waiting for breakouts, enduring dry spells, holding positions through storms of uncertainty. Some could not bear it. They abandoned the rules in search of action, confusing movement with progress. But progress in trading is not measured by constant activity. It is measured by consistency of discipline. To endure the long silence of waiting is itself a trial of strength, a test of whether the trader serves impulse or process. Have you felt that burning need to act, even when no signal calls? The hand hovers over the mouse, the heart pounds, the imagination races. You tell yourself, if I do not enter now, I will miss the move. Yet in truth, what you fear is not missing the move. You fear missing the feeling of being alive, of being engaged, of being at the center of the storm. The unconscious hungers for stimulation, and trading becomes its drug. The chart becomes not a tool of probability, but a fix for restlessness. And so you act, and so you pay. Again and again. This cycle mirrors the archetype of addiction. Just as the gambler is enslaved to the spin of the wheel, so too does the undisciplined trader become enslaved to the flicker of candles. Losses are rationalized, wins are exaggerated, and the account becomes a stage for the psyche's drama rather than a ledger of probability. Addiction is not about money, it is about escape. The addicted trader seeks not profit but release from the void within. Until that void is faced, no strategy can save him. The Stoics would remind us that impatience is rooted in illusion. Marcus Aurelius wrote that time is like a river, flowing without end, carrying all things with it. The trader who demands certainty, who demands that profit appear now, is like a man trying to command the river. The river does not listen. It flows as it will. To resist its current is to drown. To align with it is to float. In trading, patience is not weakness. It is alignment with the flow of the market, the acceptance that your will is small compared to the vastness of uncertainty. And yet, when the signal finally comes, another battle begins. The mind, having waited so long, trembles with both relief and terror. You see the breakout form, you know the rule, but the voice of doubt returns. What if this one fails? What if the long wait ends in pain? Here, fear rises once again, cloaked in the memory of past wounds. The shadow whispers of every loss you have ever endured, magnifying them into omens. To act here requires not merely courage, but faith not in the market, but in yourself, in the discipline you have chosen, in the process that holds your ego accountable. Do you see how every step of trading is a mirror? The waiting reveals your relationship with silence. The entry reveals your relationship with fear. The holding reveals your relationship with uncertainty. The exit reveals your relationship with loss and letting go. Each part of the trade is a doorway into your own unconscious, a chance to face the archetypes that have ruled you in secret. Few recognize this. They think they are battling charts, but they are battling God's ancient forces of desire, fear, and pride that live in every soul. The turtles were apprentices in this sacred combat. Some bowed under the weight and fled. Others endured. Those who endured discovered that trading was not merely about wealth, but about transformation. Each rule followed was a blow struck against the ego's tyranny. Each disciplined exit was an act of humility. Each patient wait was an act of faith. In time, the ones who survived became not just traders, but masters of themselves. And in mastering themselves, they unlocked the true treasure, the calm that cannot be shaken by loss, the discipline that cannot be corrupted by gain, the freedom that comes only when fear and greed have lost their power. And so, when you sit before the chart, ask yourself, what archetype speaks within me now? Is it the gambler, chasing the thrill? Is it the coward, fleeing the shadow of loss? Is it the tyrant, demanding control of the uncontrollable? Or is it the warrior, still, patient, surrendered to the law of discipline? The chart will answer honestly. It always does. The market is the mirror, and the reflection never lies. There is a peculiar silence that descends after a trade is closed. For a moment, the storm of uncertainty ends. The position no longer fluctuates, the account balance is fixed, and the trader is left alone with the echo of what has just occurred. This silence is fertile ground for the unconscious to speak, and often it does so with cruelty. If the trade was a loss, the voice says, "You were foolish, you should have known better." If the trade was a gain, the voice tempts, "You are special, you have found the key, you can bend the market to your will." In either case, the voice is not truth. It is the shadow twisting experience into fuel for either shame or arrogance. The silence after the trade is not an ending, it is another test. Richard Dennis designed his system to protect his students from this very temptation. The turtle rules demanded that one move immediately to the next trade when the signal appeared, without lingering in self-congratulation or self-condemnation. For the psyche, however, this was the hardest task. Human beings crave narrative. They wish to explain why they won, why they lost, why they deserve one outcome and not another. Yet the market cares nothing for narrative. The rules reduce the story to numbers: entry, stop, exit. To obey is to step beyond the human craving for meaning and into the realm of probability. Few can bear this. Most would rather cling to stories, even if the stories destroy them. Have you felt this hunger for explanation after a trade? The urge to dissect, to justify, to place blame or to inflate pride. It feels like clarity, but in truth it is a trap. The more you cling to the story of one trade, the more you empower the ego to distort the next. A trader who believes a win proves his genius is already preparing for overconfidence. A trader who believes a loss proves his inadequacy is already sowing the seeds of hesitation. Both are caught in the same illusion, that the outcome defines the self. The outcome defines nothing. It is the discipline of process that defines the trader. This truth is the essence of Stoic practice. Epictetus taught that one must distinguish between what is within control and what is not. In trading, the outcome is never within control. The rules are. The outcome is wind and wave. The rules are the ship. To identify with the outcome is to become a leaf tossed by the storm. To identify with the rules is to become the helmsman who holds steady regardless of where the tide flows. The turtles who thrived understood this distinction. They measured themselves not by dollars gained or lost, but by fidelity to the process. The money was a consequence, not an identity. But the shadow resists this liberation. It demands that self-worth hinge upon success. It whispers that only a winning trader is valuable, that losses are shameful wounds. This projection is ancient, rooted in the fear of rejection, the longing for validation. Jung would say the trader projects the archetype of the judge upon the market, believing it to reward or punish like a parent. In truth, the market does not judge, it only reflects. The punishment is self-inflicted, the shame conjured by the ego that cannot endure imperfection. Perhaps you recognize this within yourself, the tightening of the chest after a loss, the irrational need to prove yourself again, the frantic search for a new setup to erase the sting. This is not strategy, this is vengeance. And vengeance has no place in trading. The turtles who ignored this truth destroyed themselves, for revenge trades are not trades at all. They are the shadow's attempt to restore pride, and pride is always blind. And yet, the same silence after a trade can be transformed. For the disciplined trader, the silence becomes a meditation. He asks only, did I follow the rule? Did I remain faithful to the process? If yes, then the outcome, win or loss, is accepted with equanimity. If no, then the work is not in the market, but within the soul. Why did I disobey? What fear seized me? What greed tempted me? What archetype held power in that moment? To reflect in this way is shadow work. It is to bring the unconscious into light, to integrate the parts of the self that sabotage discipline. This is the true alchemy of trading, turning the lead of impulse into the gold of self. The trader who reaches this level discovers a strange freedom. He no longer dreads losses, for losses are teachers. He no longer clings to wins, for wins are merely confirmation that discipline was kept. He begins to see trading as a mirror of individuation itself, the long process of uniting conscious and unconscious into wholeness. Every signal becomes a chance not only to earn, but to know oneself more deeply. The market ceases to be a battlefield of enemies and becomes a temple of initiation. Each trade is a ritual. Each loss a sacrifice, each win a gift, each rule an act of devotion to the higher self. This transformation is rare, but it is possible. It requires the death of the ego's illusions. the courage to stand before uncertainty without flinching, the patience to wait without hunger, the discipline to act without hesitation. The trader who attains this state does not appear glamorous. He is calm, almost detached, quiet in victory, steady in defeat. To the untrained eye, he seems ordinary, yet within him burns the fire of mastery, the fire that has conquered fear, subdued greed, and integrated the shadow into strength. This is the trader Richard Dennis dreamed of creating with his experiment. This is the archetype of the true turtle, not merely a follower of rules, but a disciple of self. There is a threshold that few traders ever cross, a hidden doorway where trading ceases to be a desperate struggle for profit and becomes a practice of inner alchemy. At first, the market is an adversary, a dragon to be slain, a force that mocks your efforts and devours your mistakes. But with time, and with discipline, a shift occurs. The trader begins to see that the dragon was never outside, it was always within. The market was merely the mirror, a vast reflecting surface showing every hidden fear, every unexamined desire, every fragment of shadow. To cross the threshold is to stop fighting the reflection and to start transforming the self. Richard Dennis's turtles, those who endured, came to understand this truth without naming it. They entered the program expecting to learn how to conquer the market. They left with something deeper, the realization that they had been training to conquer their own unconscious. Each rule they followed was not just a trading tactic, it was a discipline of the psyche. Each stop-loss was a lesson in humility. Each breakout was a lesson in courage. Each patient hold was a lesson in endurance. The profits were proof, not that they had beaten the system, but that they had mastered themselves enough to obey it. Have you noticed how the greatest temptation comes not at the point of failure, but at the moment of success? A string of wins swells the ego. The trader feels chosen, as if the market itself has bowed to his genius. In that intoxication, rules appear unnecessary. Why follow a system when you feel like the system itself? This is when ruin lurks closest. Overconfidence is the shadow wearing a crown. It blinds, it seduces, it convinces you that discipline is weakness. And yet every account destroyed by arrogance proves the same lesson. The market is not conquered by brilliance, but by obedience. Brilliance without obedience is a spark that burns bright and dies fast. Obedience without brilliance is a flame that burns slow and steady, illuminating the path for years. The Stoics would recognize this truth immediately. Marcus Aurelius warned himself each morning that the world would bring arrogance, deception, greed, and folly. He prepared not to change the world, but to master his own response. The trader must do the same. Each day, the market will bring uncertainty, temptation, fear, and overconfidence. You cannot change that, but you can meet it with discipline. You can choose not to be ruled by it. You can choose to be steady when others are frantic, patient when others are impulsive, humble when others are intoxicated by pride. And in this steadiness, something remarkable begins to grow. Detachment. Detachment is not apathy. It is not the absence of caring. It is the freedom to act without being enslaved by the outcome. When you are detached, a loss does not wound your identity. A win does not inflate your ego. You remain grounded, disciplined, aligned with the process. This is liberation, the kind of freedom the turtles who succeeded discovered quietly, without fanfare. They became immune to the chaos that ruled other traders. They could sit through storms, obey their rules, and accept outcomes with equanimity. This was not superhuman. It was simply the fruit of discipline ripening into detachment. Perhaps you wonder if such detachment is possible for you. Perhaps you feel too entangled, too wounded by losses, too intoxicated by wins. But understand this, detachment is not born overnight. It is forged one disciplined act at a time. Each time you obey your rule despite fear, you loosen the grip of fear. Each time you take a small loss without anger, you loosen the grip of shame. Each time you exit with discipline instead of greed, you loosen the grip of arrogance. Slowly, the chains fall away, and you find yourself no longer a slave to the unconscious. You become the master of your mind, and through that, the master of your trading. Jung would call this individuation the process of becoming whole, integrating the shadow, uniting the conscious and unconscious into harmony. Trading, at its highest level, becomes a vehicle for individuation. Every chart is a dream image, every trade a symbolic act, every loss an opportunity to integrate humility, every win an opportunity to integrate restraint. The trader who sees this no longer asks, how much can I earn today? But instead, what can I learn about myself today? Profit is not abandoned, it is transmuted, transformed into a measure of self-mastery, rather than and at last, when this threshold is crossed, the trader becomes something rare, calm in the face of chaos, disciplined in the face of temptation, free in the face of uncertainty. He is no longer bound to the endless cycle of fear and greed, loss and revenge, pride and collapse. He has stepped beyond the mirror, beyond the projections, beyond the shadow. He has become whole. He has discovered that the true victory was never over the market, but always over the self. The trader who conquers the mind has already conquered the market,